Hey, it's Doug Tabor, rental property broker, and as I'm preparing for a episode of the Financial Advisors on AM 600 Kogo Radio with Aubrey Morrow, I was thinking about what we're going to discuss. Aubrey's always looking for interesting topics, content that we might share with his listeners. And I thought about the current state of the market and the fact that it's an incredible seller's market. Things are happening extremely fast. If you see this property that I'm standing in front of, the reason I chose this as a backdrop is because I just put this on the market about a month ago, and I received 40 offers on this little property. It's a 3-home on 1 lot, East San Diego County, and I got 40 offers, and we went way above list price. And quite candidly, it happened so quickly that now we're having to move quickly. And I thought it would be a good idea to discuss tips to successfully sell a rental property. So I'm going to go through this list with you. And if you're considering a possible sale of your rental property, just give you an idea of how you might be able to prepare in advance. The first item is around the idea of leases. If you have an expiring lease coming up, don't renew your leases. Don't renew your leases. Allow your leases and your tenants' engagements with you to go month to month. Many of my clients, you might relate to this, have rents that are very, very far under market. And when you're selling your property, most of the time we want to sell it for the highest and best price. And what you want to do is you want to give that buyer the opportunity to engage that tenant, set up their own terms, and possibly raise rents. That's just the reality of being in a rental. If they're locked into a lease, it really restricts the hands of the buyers. And so it makes it a little more difficult to sell for highest and best price. So if you have an expiring lease, just let it go month to month. The new buyer will generally set up a new lease, negotiate a new lease with that tenant, and that just gives you more flexibility during the sale. Along that line, if you have a tenant that's moving out in the next 30 days prior to putting it on the market, I would keep that unit vacant if possible. If you can afford it, keep that unit vacant. Again, this gives you the opportunity to allow a buyer to come in and they can put their own tenant in place at their own rents, or like many of these properties that are the smaller properties, the duplex, triplex, fourplex properties, oftentimes the buyer will want to move into a unit. So now there's a vacant unit that's going to allow that buyer to move in, make it owner occupied. Maybe that's the kind of loan that they're going to get. It's an owner occupied loan, which is going to require them to move in. So if you have a vacant unit, it makes it so much easier. Also a positive on the note with vacant units, it allows the agent, myself, rental property broker, to show the unit to prospective buyers. And oftentimes when you have multifamily properties, the prospective buyers don't get to go inside a unit until we're really under contract, because we don't like to disturb the tenants. We have to post notices. So generally we only show those with an accepted offer. But if you have a vacant unit, here's an opportunity for you to show what the property looks like on the inside. A side note to that is if it's vacant, you want to make sure it's in rent-ready condition. What that means is basically it's going to be in the condition that you would put it back on the rental market, so you can market to prospective tenants. So it can't be just tenant moved out, the carpets are dirty, the walls are dirty. Whatever you normally do before you move a new tenant in, we call that rent-ready condition. So keep a unit vacant if possible. The next one is really important. Be ready for the paperwork. And that's why it's always good to engage an agent or a broker to start talking about some of the paperwork. And what do I mean by paperwork? I have a list here that I keep, that I give to all my clients. It's my due diligence checklist. And when I mean paperwork, I mean a copy of the current rent roll and deposit schedule, income and expense reports for the last 2.5 years, 3 years, which would include your Schedule E, especially for around tax time. Take a copy of that Schedule E as an echo, which will have your rental income for the year. Copies of leases and rental agreements, water, electricity, trash bills. Usually we like to provide up to 3 months copies of those bills and utilities. An important one is a 5-year lost run letter from your insurance company. Oftentimes when someone's buying a property, if they're going to get it insured, they want a letter showing what claims there were, if any, over the last 5 years. And that's called a 5-year lost run letter. If you have landscaping contracts, pest control contracts, if you have a laundry service contract, many of you have laundry rooms where you lease the equipment. If you have that contract, we'd like to see a copy of that to pass on to prospective buyers, as well as, of course, any property management agreements. So that's your standard due diligence documentation. Another area where you might be looking is collecting documentation on any capital expenses that you've made over the last 5 years. Now, I'm not talking about a list of all the minor repairs that you've made over the last 5 years, but we're talking about CapEx or capital expenses. Did you replace a roof? If you look at this property right here, those are replaced roofs. So we'd want to provide documentation of those roofs, specifically with warranties around roofs. Usually they have a 10 or 15-year warranty. Did you replace a water heater? Do you have the documentation for that? Was there a major plumbing or electrical upgrade? Any major projects that you did on the property in the last 5 years, we call those CapEx projects, capital expenditures. And then finally, we always request a personal property worksheet. In other words, personal property that's going to convey with the property. Number of refrigerators, number of stoves, oftentimes appliances, number of washer and dryers. We have a list for that. And if you're interested in these lists that I have here, send me an email and I can send you a copy of this list so you can start preparing for it. But prepare due diligence documents well in advance so that once we get under contract, you're not stressed over trying to collect all these documents in order to meet the deadlines. Because typically in a standard California Association of Realtors contract form, there's 7 days to present all this information to the buyer. Set up your 1031 exchange in advance with a qualified intermediary. This one is extremely important if you're going to be doing a 1031 exchange. Right now, the market is so busy that the exchange accommodators are all overwhelmed. I know Exeter 1031 Exchange Services, who we partner with, they're doing 4 times more than they're normally used to. So to get someone in there, especially if it's a shorter escrow, is very difficult. So I highly recommend that you meet with them well in advance, get that paperwork set up, give all your information to them so that you can be in their system, whoever that exchange accommodator is that you're going to use, be in their system so that when the time comes, when you do get under contract, you're not stressing over doing all of this in that short time frame. Remember, the day your sale closes is the 45-day time limit that starts. So you definitely don't want to be trying to pull together information at the 11th hour of the escrow in order to meet that deadline. Because if it closes and you do take receipt of those funds without having that 1031 exchange set up, you are now going to be paying taxes 30 to 40% of what your gains are. So definitely a tip is set up your 1031 exchange well in advance. And if you have questions on that, reach out to me once again, and we can get you the documentation, get you over to an exchange accommodator that we recommend, and you can set that up well in advance. The next one is meet with your CPA or accountant before you decide to list or sell your property. I get clients that come in all the time and they're fired up. They want to sell their property. They're going to cash out. They're not going to do a 1031 exchange. But then once they come to realize what the actual amount of the taxes, amount of the gains are going to be, they usually backtrack a little bit. So it's always prudent to sit down with your CPA, with your accountant, talk about the possibility of a sale, and then get an idea of what those tax consequences are going to be. Because quite frankly, it's the number one concern that my clients have when we speak to them are tax consequences. And meeting with your CPA and accountant will give you a good idea. You know, we always throw out benchmarks numbers because we're not even allowed to talk about taxes necessarily as an agent. So that's why I usually say 30, 40% of what your gain is. I don't know what it is, but your tax preparer will, your CPA will. So meet with them as well. Take them the documentation. You're already collecting that documentation anyways, because a sale may not be in your best interest. So it's important that you discover that right away. And then along those lines, meet with someone like me for an accurate valuation of your property, a recent accurate valuation of your property. My clients are oftentimes blown away when I go through and I do the numbers and I get a detailed analysis done and find out really what their property is worth, what I would sell it for in today's marketplace. And I don't mean just pulling comps or going on the MLS. As a CCIM, as a rental property broker, we're going to really dig deep into the numbers. Rental properties are a lot different than just selling a single family house. We're looking at rent, we're looking at income, we're looking at rental surveys. In fact, our valuations include a rental survey that you would receive. We're looking at comparable sales. We're also looking at, where the market's going as far as rents, what kind of demand there is. We put together essentially a 35-page report. And we do that complimentary, by the way. That's one of the ways we try to earn your business in advance, is by putting together this very detailed report. We put a lot of work into it, and it gives you a nice deliverable that you can hold on to, that gives you a time and a date and what we think the value is of your property and what we can put it on the market for. So get a valuation. Sometimes they're called CMAs, comparative market analysis. That's more for the single family. But on the multifamily stuff, the bigger stuff, broker opinion of value is BOV. And then finally, my biggest recommendation, if you haven't already done so, watch the webinar that I created with Bill Exeter and Aubrey Morrow on how to sell highly appreciated rental real estate. We discuss everything in there that you're going to need if you're considering a sale, from what those taxes would look like in detail. We had one of the prominent tax advisors, CPAs in town here in San Diego County, create a presentation on what those taxes would look like if you were looking to sell. And then we have Bill Exeter, the guy who literally wrote the booklet on 1031 exchanges. He does a 45-minute talk on all the different aspects of a 1031 exchange. And then Aubrey and I come in after Bill and we discuss what your options are. If you're looking to do an exchange, what type of passive investment options do you have? Are you interested in a net lease property? A single tenant, triple net lease property. You're looking to buy a Jack in the Box or a Taco Bell or a Chase Bank building somewhere out of the state. And then Aubrey comes in and talks about a very popular Delaware statutory trust investment opportunity. That's where you're able, as an individual investor, to invest in big institutional style properties. And Aubrey does a great job of presenting that information. If you haven't watched the webinar, check it out. It's free to register. We've got nothing but great feedback on that webinar. We make it very educational. We're not trying to do a sales pitch, but anybody who is interested in possibly selling their rental property in this incredible seller's market. Remember, 40 offers on this little property. If you're interested, now is a good time to consider it, but definitely take into consideration some of the tips we presented. Again, I'm Doug Tabor, CCIM, rental property broker. I look forward to serving you in the future. Take care.